Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Princeton, where in our open and welcoming community, we live our message of hope, love, justice, and joy. Whether you've joined us here in Channing Hall or live on Zoom, it's wonderful to be together on this brand new day. And we extend a special welcome to our visitors this morning. We're really happy that you're here, and we invite you to stop by our newcomer table after the service if you haven't already, so that we can get you any information that you'd like about our congregation. And we extend a special welcome to our guests from the Crossing Paths group at our Monmouth County UU congregation. We're joining our Crossing Paths groups this morning to learn about paganism with some of our Evergreen Cups leaders. It's wonderful to have you here. Welcome to UU Princeton. Before your Reverend Craig was your Reverend Craig, he was our Reverend Craig. So we share a lot of things here. Welcome, we're so glad that you're here. We invite you to join us here in Channing Hall this afternoon, again at 3 p.m. to enjoy the artistry of the New Jersey Gay Men's Chorus. This concert is offered by our Rainbow Ministry and our Music Ministry, and all are welcome. The concert is free, but donations will be gratefully accepted. We also invite you after the service. The Refugee Welcoming Committee invites you to stop by the table out there in the lounge to sign a welcome card for our new family who we're offering temporary emergency housing to here in the building. You can draw a picture or leave a photo of yourself as well. There will be copies of common Farsi phrases and their translation phonetic spelling in English, so you can take a moment and practice that too. Also after worship, so you'll sign the card, and then you will go to our brunch, which is hosted by our Women's Alliance. Please enjoy a delicious brunch sponsored by the Alliance in the Founders Room. These announcements always make me hungry. There will be homemade casseroles, soups, quiches, salads, cold drinks, and desserts, as well as bagels and cream cheese, hot dogs, rolls, vegetarian, vegan, and gluten-free food choices included. All brunch proceeds will be used to support local, national, and international organizations that serve women and children. Also from the Women's Alliance, the Alliance cordially invites you to their April luncheon program in person in the Founders Room at church this Thursday, April 20th. You can bring a sandwich or salad to share. Hot and cold beverages and desserts will be provided for lunch and socializing beginning at noon. And then the program, which is titled Montessori in Ukraine, a vision and a reality of what happens in war with Ginny Cusack, will begin at 1 p.m. on Thursday. So lunch at noon, program at 1. Ms. Cusack is a Montessori educator, former director of the Princeton Center for Teacher Education, and former head of Lakeside Montessori Center. No reservation is needed, and of course, everyone is welcome to the lunch and the program. And now a word about today's service, which is called the Question Box Service. These are somewhat common in our faith. We did these about once a year before COVID and then got away from them, but are happy to return to the question box this morning. And the idea is that instead of a sermon, Reverend Jennifer and I will respond to your questions, or at least as many of them as we have time for, but you have to write them down. Some of you have already emailed them in, which is great, but if you haven't, there are note cards and pencils on the table just outside those back doors in Robinson. And during the greeting, we invite you to get a note card, jot down your question about theology or faith or spiritual practices or our lives or whatever you like, and we'll do our best to answer them. And then you'll turn them in during the candles part of the worship service. So after you write them down, just hold on to them. And then when we all come up for candles, you can come up with your questions. Except for kids. That'll happen during the Wonder and Wisdom part with Reverend Jennifer. Yeah, bring them up for Wonder and Wisdom. Alrighty. And now with mind and heart, may we celebrate and praise the one light that offers each sunbeam, the one breath that fills each body, the one fire that lights each spark, and the one sea to which all waters flow. Come, as many and as one, let us worship together.
Unfortunately, Kirsten couldn't be here this morning. She's not feeling well, so she's doing what we ask of all in that, which is stay home to care for our entire community. But these are the chalice lighting words she had picked out by Walter Royal Jones Jr. Mindful of truth ever exceeding our knowledge and community ever exceeding our practice, reverently we covenant together, beginning with ourselves as we are, to share the strength of integrity and the heritage of the Spirit in the unending quest for wisdom and love. I invite the young at heart forward for our wonder and wisdom this morning. And if you do have a question written down, you can bring that up. Or if you have a question on your mind that you just would like to ask, we'll see how that goes. All right. So I'll need 2 volunteers this morning to open our Wonder Box. So the first hands I saw were Nola Rose and Anna. So one of you can come up first. You can pick one thing out. What do we got there? We have dinosaurs. This is going to be in relation to one of our questions submitted ahead of time. And then Anna, if you want to come and get our other one, or do you want to do this together? Outer space, yes. Thank you so very much. You can go sit back down. So we had a question that came in this week that asked, what came first? Or did dinosaurs come before God? And so these are a couple of pictures that I thought of in potentially answering this question. So first, want to start with when dinosaurs lived on our Earth. So we know that dinosaurs became extinct about 65 million years ago. That's a long, long time ago. And they lived on the Earth for about another 100 years, 165 million years they were here. So someone shared if all of Earth time from the very beginning of the dinosaurs to today were compressed into 1 year, the dinosaurs began on January 1st, became extinct the 3rd week of September, so a good part of the year. And if we use this time scale, the Earth would have been created about 18.5 years earlier than the dinosaurs. And if we use the same scale, people would have been on Earth since only December 31st. And our universe was created 13.8 billion years ago. Billions are bigger than millions. And that was when before there was all this, it is understood that there was like a tiny, tiny piece of matter, of energy, that some of you know this. What happened with that? It exploded. And we call this the Big Bang. And the Big Bang resulted in this ever expanding universe. And that happened, if I did the math right, about 13,500 million years before the dinosaurs. Because the Earth wasn't created for the dinosaurs to live on until after this Big Bang happened. Now, what caused this explosion is a mystery. We don't know. But some say that God created the universe, or maybe that God energy came into being at the time of the Big Bang, which, if we went by that, would mean God came before the dinosaurs. So that is one potential answer to that question. One potential answer to that question. Yes, Wesley? What is my favorite superhero? I really, really love that you asked that question. So I'm a bit more Marvel over DC. Sorry, I like DC folks, but DC comics, but my brother watched them on repeat too many times when he was very young. So I've gotten more into Marvel, which Wesley, I know you like too, right? You like Spider-Man and Hulk. So I really am excited for the Ms. Marvel movie to come out because I love the multiverse. But if I could have any super person's powers, I want the powers of Doctor Strange because he's the magical wizard type thing that can stop time and create all those parallel things. And I think that is really, really cool. What superhero would you like to be, Reverend Bill? All right. He said Spider-Man. Spider-Man. Do we have any other questions? You want to be Batman? Did you have a question, Nate? What's 9 plus 9? 99. That's another way to put it together. It's another way to put it together. A 1,000 plus 1,000. We got some of you will be very, very excited that we might have some budding mathematicians here. Yeah. So I had another thing to potentially share with you. While this question didn't come into the question box, it's one that is asked of me often, which is, what and why is the chalice a symbol of Unitarian Universalism? So our chalice is made up of two things. We have a cup. The chalice is a cup. It's a special cup. A cup can hold water. You can place soup or food within it. So the cup can be seen as a symbol of life because those things sustain life. That's one interpretation. And then we have, this is my favorite chalice flame right now. We have a chalice flame. And our flame is mysterious because fire is mysterious. We can feel heat from it, but we can't hold or touch it, right? No, that wouldn't be good. And it provides light, and it's a pretty magical thing because you can always light more candles or more things off a single one and spread that light. And we light our chalice at the beginning of worship services, at the beginning of other times that we gather, including in our classrooms, to remind ourselves that everything we do together is special time and time that is important to the life of our congregation. And you'll see the symbol in all kinds of places. You'll see some of them on stoles that ministers wear. You might see them, I have a necklace on. Some people have jewelry where chalices are on. Sometimes you see them on bumper stickers. Does anyone have a UU bumper sticker on their car? We have got a couple folks. Some of us just don't put bumper stickers on our cars anymore. And like a little flame, so some of us have like keychains, or you might have gotten a backpack charm at some point in time. So there's a lot of places. And on our name tags, yes, and throughout our building. So originally the chalice was created as something to put on pieces of paper. It was what's known as two-dimensional, not in this 3D form. And it was used by a group called the Unitarian Service Committee, who were helping Jewish refugees escape the Nazi regime. It was put on important papers to help them with that. And then so that was in the 40s, but it took until the 1980s, still a long time ago, all the way when Reverend Bill and I were kids, long time ago, that chalices began to be lit in our times of worship. And the way that began to happen, because in the 1970s, kids were beginning to learn in their religious education classes about the chalice, and they started making them. And history, from what we can find out, shows that it was after children and teens led worship services and showed off the chalices and lit the chalices they had been using in their classrooms to the adults in their congregation. It was then that adults in congregations and all of us all together started to light a chalice in congregations. It's another example of how our children and youth have made an impact on what we do as a community, not only here at UU Princeton, but throughout our continent. I wonder what the chalice might mean to you. It can mean all kinds of different things: the light of truth, the warmth of community, a sense of hope, but for each of us, that is different. So I invite you to hold that wondering as you all depart for your classes with your guides this morning. Have a good time.
O God of many names, the personal and mysterious, we have come to a quiet time, an interior place, a place for the deepening of spirit, the enrichment of soul, and the growth of knowledge. We seek to know ourselves by knowing you and knowing the world. Let us have the courage to sit in the unknowing, to look for the answers, even if they are to sit with our own questions, to be willing to be authentic with ourselves, to be ready to bring our face to the world. Let us question that which our reality knows by asking how to love neighbor and friend, by pursuing a morality that breaks oppressive barriers. Let us be willing to know others by welcoming their genuine features, by welcoming them to the world, our sacred circles, and our homes, by appreciating the beauty that comes from seeing wholeness and truth. Let us sit in that quiet depth as we ponder the mystery of life and love. Amen.
Here we go. So I'll start with a question that was submitted beforehand. Still looks through some of these. And it was a question between, what's the difference between a ministerial intern and a seminarian? Because we use those terms here. So a ministerial intern is someone that is with us as their teaching congregation. It could be that they're in the process of doing their internship as part of their coursework in seminary, as Matthew is doing. It could be as some that might be doing their ministerial internship as part of their requirement to become a minister affiliated with the Unitarian Universalist Association, which many have done in the past here. Or it could be a combination of both. Some are both fulfilling coursework credits as well as this being part of what needs to be shown for what is known as the Ministerial Fellowship Committee of the UUA. Now, a seminarian is a term that actually Pauline Najanders helped inspire. And so it is used by anyone who is currently in seminary and a part of the community of this congregation. So that is recognizing them as continuing in their path of learning. And then the second part of this question was, what is the process you undergo to become a minister? Pauline, you want to take this one? I would say that there are two parts. There is like the how do you get from the point within our Unitarian Universalist Association from what we know is aspirant or candidate, folks that are saying that they are interested in becoming a Unitarian Universalist minister through the process of what is known as full fellowship. It's no longer final fellowship because we're still learning as we are ministers. There's nothing final about this work. And so that includes in that process being sponsored by a Unitarian Universalist Association. I'll use myself as an example. I was sponsored by our congregation at Washington Crossing. It involves going to seminary. Bill and I are both alums of Meadville Lombard Theological School, which is one of our two UUA affiliated seminaries. It involves completing a unit of clinical pastoral education that is chaplaincy training, either in a hospice or a hospital or another healthcare setting, most often. And then it is essentially sitting before Unitarian Universalists who are lay leaders, who are ministers, who are religious educators. There's a psychologist in the room. In which you, and there's a psychologist you see in the process of this, you have an entire sort of like career assessment review earlier on. But that is the Ministerial Fellowship Committee. And in that meeting, you preach a, 7-8 minute sermon. They cut you off as soon as you hit the timing, whether you have said amen and blessed be or not. And then they rapid round questions at you and make an assessment at that time if you're moving forward into what's known as preliminary fellowship. And then every year or every other year for multiple years, you fill out a big packet of how you're doing. Usually anywhere between 3 years and I think in 10 years, I feel like is the general thing, depending on how you are doing your ministry or serving in your ministry, you will reach the point of what is known as full fellowship. And then we continue our learning and growth. That's like if you're going to become a UUA affiliated minister side. And then there is your internal process of when you feel a call, whatever that may be. How many times you say, no, I don't, as I did, could you call someone else? A very biblical thing. And your own growth and learning in your path to actually feeling ready at a point to whether it's kneel or stand before a congregation and feel that laying on of hands in the moment, because only congregations can ordain ministers. The UUA may say, we feel this person is ready, but only a congregation can affirm someone into ministry.
Excellent. Yeah, it's fun. It's real fun. Once it's over, it's fun.
Yeah. Ordinations are awesome, as are installations.
The cool thing for me, and I think for a lot of UU seminarians as you go through it, is you're supported by a group of people who are going through the same formation. And so you're never doing it alone. You have colleagues in formation with you, and those become some of your closest colleagues for the rest of, closest friends for the rest of your lives. It's really rewarding. All right, so those were submitted. This is one that we got an email. Why is the congregation in or building referred to by the word church? And then there's more. I'm not going to read the whole question because it's kind of long, but it gets into the differentiation between church and congregation. And UU Princeton has sort of walked this journey in its history. It was a fellowship, I believe, and then became a church, or maybe it was a church and then a fellowship and then became a congregation. Bodies choose different names sometimes over the course of their lives to kind of reflect who they are. Generally, in our world, we think of as church, the church is the building, the congregation is the gathering, the congregation is the people. That's a distinction that many different faiths, particularly Protestant and Catholic religious bodies, would not make. They would not really make a distinction between the congregation and the church. The church is the body of people, but we make that distinction here. So when we say church, we're often talking about the building. When we say congregation, we're talking about the people. But I do want to preface it by saying that that's a distinction that's not I think at one time it was more broadly stated and shared in our faith, but it's becoming less and less distinct, I think, in our modern faith. And then why is the service referred to as worship? I don't think the overwhelming majority of us come here to worship anything, anybody, or a God. I'm not sure if I agree with the second part. I think a lot of folks who come to worship are coming to worship something. But worship for me is about an experience of reverence and connection and reminding ourselves of something larger than our lives, something that we can praise, something that we can be humble before, that we can seek to connect with. Worship is more about a shared communal experience than it is that object. And in our faith, we make lots and lots of room for different understandings of an object, different expressions, ideals, principles, beings, presences, lots of room for all sorts of diversities around that. But I think worship is about the shared experience here. So I think that's how we use the term.
Right. So a question that came from you today, how would you respond to a friend who, quote, challenges that Unitarian Universalism is not a religion because there is no dogma or set of beliefs? I would challenge that there isn't a set of values in terms of, as we all know, in terms of what we believe about the universe, about God, about the great mystery or no great mystery, depending on where we are. We all have different understandings. But I do believe we come together in a shared understanding that those beliefs are grounded in love, that those beliefs are grounded in inclusion, that those beliefs are grounded in justice and equity and great care and respect. Religion means to bind. And I personally know of no other way that's of a deeper bind than an abiding love that holds us. And if our values, if the center of all our values is love, that is a religious thing to come together in that bind.
Perfect, thank you. So this one was submitted also, if it's kind of along those lines, so we'll jump to it. If God is love, as Christians believe, does that mean you have to believe in a deity in order to truly love others? No, you don't have to believe in a deity to truly love others. I know plenty of avowed atheists who reject any belief in any deity who are extremely loving people, and I know lots of folks who claim all sorts of belief in God who seem pretty far from loving these days. And I think that God is love is less about trying to define love and more about trying to express that love is the central guiding force in the universe. Love is what draws us out of ourselves and towards other people. Love is what draws us toward our highest purpose, toward living the kind of lives we want to lead in alignment with our ethics and morals. Love can guide us as God guides theists sometimes. But the answer is no, I don't think you have to believe in a deity to truly love others. And then, or is love God, and by showing love to others, we create or produce the Holy Spirit. That's one way of thinking. I hadn't thought about it like that, but I think that when we enact love in the world, we are creating something holy and sacred. When we bring love to an unloving space, when we respond not just with love, but with patience, with kindness, with generosity, with any great virtue, particularly in this space that's lacking those virtues or is present of vices, then we are adding something holy or sacred to the world, which I think is how we transform the world. The tricky thing is, I think the biggest transformations we can have along these lines are in our families and in our friendships and schools and workplaces. We often think of global, national transformation on a big scale, but the big transformations are really in the heart, and they're with the people we know, we see all the time, our closest relationships. And that can be sometimes where it's hardest to put those virtues and values into practice. But great question. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. Sure. What has been the biggest challenge to your faith, and how did you resolve it? You breathe through this one. What immediately came to mind was in serving my previous congregation, people whom I love dearly, but I stepped into that as a newly full fellowshipped minister and leaned into my over-functioning hardcore. And my departure came because the amount of leaning into that, I was physically and spiritually depleted. I was really not feeling well. I had a medical leave, and then even after the medical leave, I needed to take time and take a breather. And I remember describing this feeling to my spiritual director at that time of, I come from Jewish heritage. And so my great-grandmother, Jenny, of who I am named after, told my mother when my mother said, you know, you never go to temple. Why is that? And my great-grandmother responded that, well, you don't have to go to a place to be with God. God is just right there. God is, you know, in the ether around you. And so I carry that as one of my interpretation of what spirit, love, divinity, the holy that I understand may be. And at that time, I had an understanding of, okay, this is all around me, but I can no longer touch it. I am not feeling what once served me. So here I was in this place of serving a faith and not feeling the faith. That was shattering. And so I knew I had to take care of myself and come back to the practices that served me, to surround myself by people who loved me as me, outside of the role. And through that, and through a deepening of understanding for me of connection, of that there are sets of people that are either connected to their greater understanding, whatever that might be, the power of good in humanity, and then folks that come away from that. And so I funnel as much as I can into time for myself now, to be in that place of connection and joy and love and care, and looking for the opportunities where I will be served in that. And that, you know, the ways that I am able to do ministry at this congregation is a huge part of it. Pastoral care and being with little ones are wonderful. And outside of that, it's a lot of really deep work of, is the discipline. It's the discipline of maintaining connection to what I understand is my divine source.
Okay, do UU principles specifically embrace nonviolence as per MLK, Martin Luther King Jr., et cetera? Or does UU espouse the just versus unjust war philosophy, i.e. Thomas Aquinas and the UN, et cetera? So it kind of depends on what we mean by the UUA, or UU as a faith movement, is not a peace church like the Quakers or the Mennonites or anything. Certainly values peace, values great hesitance in any kind of war or military action, values diplomacy, things like that. I'm thinking about when I was in seminary, it was when, so far back now, it was when we were invading Iraq, the second Bush's invasion of Iraq. And there was a lot of discussion there around just war and unjust war, and UU takes on it. And just war and unjust war, they were theories and ways that we could have the discussion in our congregations and in seminary and in our faith, but they didn't provide the kind of dogmatic guidance that they do in Catholicism. They didn't firmly answer a question. And then as we dove into it more and more, it became clear that they didn't really firmly answer the question in Catholicism either, that there were ways to have the discussions, ways to lift up values, ways to communicate about difficult things with one another along the lines of faith or within a faith context. But good, well-meaning people would come up with different conclusions at the end of the discussion. So UU principles, of course, value peace. I think every denomination's principles are guiding whatever's value peace, but we're not peace church in the sense of Quakers or Mennonites. I think that if I were to sum up a broader UU approach to this, it would probably be along the lines of Jimmy Carter's take, President Jimmy Carter's take, which is war is sometimes a necessary evil, but it's always an evil. It's an evil that sometimes has to happen to stop a greater evil, but we shouldn't mistake what's happening in times of war. That'd be how I'd sum it up. But it's we run into a little bit of trouble where you take these big, broad principles and try to zero them in toward very specific positions around specific issues. I don't think they're really meant to come up with one dogmatic answer for all you use everywhere. They're meant to be ways that we can have the discussions around common values and common perceptions. I think that's when our principles are at their strongest, when they guide and frame our discussions, because we're going to come up with different conclusions, hopefully around common values. All right, so we're going to have our offering. If this part has made any questions arise in your minds or heart, it's not too late. You can write a question on a note card, just bring it up to the table during the offering. We'll shuffle it up so that we won't like pull it up and read it, so that everyone will know it's your question.
So a query that was sent in that I did some research around, it's something that came to mind for someone when they saw we were having a question box service. Immediately thinking of the best scene in what they categorized as and others as one of the worst Star Trek movies, which apparently is The Final Frontier, where Captain Kirk and his friends go off to try and meet God. I am not a Trekkie, so I looked into this a little bit more. And it seems what some of the commentary was in an article that was shared with us was around, one, the way that the God, who apparently was not God, interacted with Captain Kirk, which was once he doubted, the power of this God sort of like shot laser beams out of his eyes. So I would say first, that God stinks. Not an understanding I believe in. And so in the film, the solution is, well, that God is not God, right? God, that there is an understanding of a concrete God. And so then there is sort of like the tension. Are human beings, as we seek to understand the universe, the world, and our place in it, would some prefer to have a concrete understanding of something for others, and some do, for others that feels very ineffable, very open. And I love this quote that was sent in a second part, which is from Star Trek Strange New Worlds. So just because you receive a message from the future doesn't mean you understand it. Which again goes into this place of not being able to completely understand something that's a mystery. And for me, also came up with our understanding of our own mortality, that which is in our futures, and not understanding what comes after that, not really, not having no ability to receive that message because we have not yet gotten there.
Alrighty, how does one include difficult family members in one's life? Slowly, I guess, and with great care. A relationship in this particular moment is the same as a relationship in the past, and is not the same as a relationship in the future. And so I think patience and a little bit of perspective can help. I look for ways in my own difficult family relationships to soften my heart just a little bit, just on the edges even, because every bit of a softening heart, I think, is better. I don't look for the flash of wide open, full-hearted embrace or anything like that. I'm not sure I'd believe it if it happened, but I do believe in a process of growth and connection that begins really, really small and is often very subtle, and is often a lot of internal stuff about how I see the world and how I see those relationships. So any movement towards softening I take as a good thing, as a blessing, as something healing, even if it doesn't actually involve the like directly the other family member. It involves me and how I move through the world. So I think I will say I'm by no means an expert on this kind of thing, but that's the approach I take in my own life. Small softenings of even just the outer edges of the heart, I think is a good way for me to go, and maybe for you too.
How can we reconcile traditions of gendered higher powers without reverting to gender essentialism? One of those places where I'm like, I don't know. Like, truly, I haven't thought as intently around this, probably because my understanding of what a higher power is not gendered. So I would need to think about this one a little more. I don't know if you have any additional thoughts.
My own take to describing deities and things like that is that whatever we describe is a necessary idol, that we're not actually describing the ultimate itself. Mm-hmm. We're using the language and ideas and perceptions that we have to describe it, and those will always be limiting, whether it's Jennifer or I from the pulpit, or down here with the kids, or in our prayer life, or wandering around in the woods and being moved by the breeze. And however we describe it is always going to be lacking. And that perspective helps, keeps you humble and at the same time sort of connected. That's a great question, though. How would you respond to a friend who challenges?
Oh, we've done that one.
Oh, we did that one?
Yeah,
sorry
we're up here.
That. My fault, sorry. Oh, okay. My glasses, even for big print, I need my glasses these days. Why do people say someone has passed when in fact they died? Are we afraid of the word? I think sometimes it's softer. People who are, who've just lost a loved one, whose loved one has just died, or in different places at different times. Sometimes folks are ready for the word death, they're ready for that claim, and at some point they have to move toward that. But sometimes in different states of being, a softer expression can be what people need to hear. Can meet them pastorally or as a friend. And I think people go through different stages of that sort of thing. And so I think when people say past, it's usually an attempt to be gentle. And I don't really have I kind of like it when folks are gentle with each other. Some folks need the finality of death. Some folks need that language, and that's fine too. But most of that comes out in relationship and actually building the pastoral ministries with one another, friendships.
When is the best time to retire? It's going to be different for each of us. As I look out into this congregation, I know some are retired from quote unquote a day job, but you are not retired. Yeah. I see how much you are contributing to the world, even if it, that's not even that shouldn't be put, and even shouldn't be put there. While not being paid in cash money, but receiving in return the richness of love and care, and sharing our values in the world. I would say it's at a time where you are balancing, there is the realities of what we may need materially in our lives, in terms of being able to care for ourselves. And also at a time where something just feels internally, something is complete. It also could be a transition. It could be a transition from one way of being into another possibility vocationally, or part-time vocationally, and more time into things that maybe serve you in different ways. I'm a couple of decades away. And as I think to that, my husband wants us earlier, but as I think to that, because I don't want to retire in some ways, right? Like I can't imagine myself not serving Unitarian Universalism in some ways. but also knowing that there are other things that I will want to explore when it's not my day job. Yeah.
Thank you for taking that because I have no clue, no earthly clue to do it. Let's see. It's so awesome that we are greeting one another during the service again. Y'all feel that way too. When we brought that back after a long time of not doing it, I had the ideas. It was kind of a new ritual. I mean, we'd done it before, but we hadn't done it in so long. And when you do a new ritual liturgically, you're supposed to over-explain it. And then you kind of under-explain it after that. But the first couple of times you over-explain it, I didn't even get half of the explanation out before y'all just started greeting each other. You just started doing it, which was kind of cool. And then when can we hold hands again during the benediction? I'm not sure that we'll return to that. That was uncomfortable for folks back before COVID. I think the world has changed quite a bit, so I'm not sure we'll get back to the expectation that we'll hold hands. The question lifts up, maybe there is a simple hand signal or head shake for those uncomfortable with this. Certainly we can play around with that. It's the kind of thing we'd experiment with. And then once the body sort of comes up with something it likes, we would do it for 3 or 4 services. And then it would be something in our collective memory that we've always done. That's kind of the way it works in the liturgical life, but we can probably come up with something like that. And then any plans for soup suppers or pizza nights or other weekly opportunities to resume that combination of fellowship and food? Sure, we just need people to do it. There's no restrictions on that anymore. We can bring those back. And we learned a lot from when we did those pre-COVID about what draws people in and what doesn't. Good programming draws people in. Ease of dinner draws people in. And so there's certainly ways to build that. We just need folks to put it together.
Okay. Ask. It's question box. We have, I think, maybe 3 or 4 total left. Would you like us to finish? Okay. And then we understand if you have another obligation and you need to gently move on to that. Okay? That is okay. So facing death is something we all must do. Does Unitarian Universalism provide support? I would say yes. I would say in terms of our faith tradition, especially on the Universalism side, and understanding that no matter what, we are held in love as we look and kind of review our life, knowing that each one of us have things that we are so thrilled that we experienced and are so proud of, and also have those difficult things that we will be thinking of relational things that did not go the way as we talked about earlier, the ways we would have wanted, or ways that we, or decisions that we may not regret, but felt like absolute crud in that process. And so, you know, I know there's still things in my mind that wake me up that, you know, I experienced 20-something years ago, and I still have real tweaks about and could still be there as I'm kind of looking back. So this understanding that through all of that, we are loved, and we are loved deeply in all of it, I know holds me. And then in terms of support from a Unitarian Universalist congregation here, we have beautiful, in terms of spirit, pastoral associates that can help with things like your family support of meals and rides to doctor's appointments and just sitting with you. You have the support of ministers that we want to be called in those moments. Many of us get into this gig because we were supported through something and want to support others. So to be able to talk about those hard moments, to be talking about those celebrations together, to have someone, to have a conversation about death and your own death at all, when most of our society has a complete freak out and doesn't know what to do or say. We might not always know what to do or say, but we're very willing to accompany.
Why do some people feel / think they deserve more or less money, time, energy, or goods than others? Richard Gilbert, who's a UU minister, wrote a book called How Much Do We Deserve? I think that was a good UU theological reflection on this question. It's around justice and the idea that people are always going to earn different amounts. Some people are going to earn more, some are going to earn less, but everyone deserves more everyone deserves enough to live a safe, comfortable life of sustenance. And the unjust approach is when some have a huge amount and some have very little, and there's really impossible to get from one place to the other when it's really hard to work up the ladder. Why do some people feel that way? I don't know. The sentiment that came to mind was the late great Pat Summitt, who was the Lady Vols women's basketball coach back when I was in college. They were a rival. We were ODU basketball fans, and they were always better than us, and so they tended to beat us. So I didn't like Pat Summitt then, but I like her now. She was very, very wise, and I understand now just a tremendous coach, and had a great impact on people. And she often repeated the old adage that some people are born on third and think they hit a triple. That some people are born with all kinds of advantages and privileges and think that they've earned this starting point that's, a half a mile down the road in the race. And I think being aware of that is important for those of us who were born with certain advantages. It's important to be aware of that, because then we can act equitably with justice in mind with what we have in life. I think that's all I can say there.
I think this is our last. We're both going to answer as asked. When or how did you decide you would be a minister? I think there was something from my core being that was gently guiding, and it's because, again, my mom would share a story of when I was very young, and I would kind of be like, sprightly, and then would go out to the end of the drive and pick up the Boston Globe, which was our local paper, and read the front page. And by the time I got back into the house, I was completely crestfallen, because I just felt so deeply what the troubles were in the world. There was just something within me that would change in those moments. And my first career path was around wanting to kind of bring things forward that were happening in other parts of the world, because I was very hopeful within that might make some change. That industry, which was broadcast journalism, wasn't doing that by the time I got there. But the moment I went to General Assembly as a young adult, Boston, 2003, and was a delegate and part of the business meeting where the presidents of our UU seminaries giving a report. And at the time, the Reverend Rebecca Parker was the president of the Star King School for the Ministry, which is our second of the two UUA affiliated seminaries. It's out in California. And she talked about the world as a tapestry and how parts of that tapestry are threadbare or worn, and that our work together in a shared ministry was to try to rebind and strengthen those places. And I knew in that moment that this was something I really wanted to at least think very, very deeply about, because that hit me at my core. And so that was 2003, and I sat with that until 2009, until I went to seminary.
I was in middle school, and I went to a Presbyterian summer camp in a Presbyterian church all the time. And we were in an outdoor worship service at a chapel that overlooked this reservoir. It was beautiful. And there was a soprano singing "A Mighty Fortress Is Our God." Y'all remember that hymn? And she would sing a verse, and then the pastor, the camp director, who's a minister and a mentor of mine, she would sing a verse, and then he would do a little reflection on the verse appropriate for middle school. in high school. It was really beautiful. And I had a sense as she was doing it, as she was singing and he was balancing it with reflection, and I can't deny, it was partly the setting. I mean, it was just stunning. I love nature anyway. I had a sense that I should do that. Like that was what sort of welled up, like I should do that. But I didn't know if I wanted to, or didn't know how to do it. Even by that point, I was pretty sure I wasn't Presbyterian, but it was still that sense of I should do that. And I remember when I talked to the soprano, who was a college student, she's like all of probably 19 or something. And I told her that, and we were talking about it, and she said that, I'm not worried about you saying yes to what you should say no to, but you might say no to what you should say yes to, and you should think about that. And that was sort of like guiding, a guiding piece of advice throughout all of that. So that's when it started, that I began to think I could be a minister. The road from there was long and winding, included leaving that faith and finding this one eventually, but that's where it started. All right, thank you so much for your questions. That was fun.
At the end of our hour, we extinguish our chalice, knowing that its light carries us until we gather again. If you have come today seeking peace, may comfort wrap you in its embrace. If you have come seeking inspiration, may you leave sustained to address the world's great unrest. Go forth from here trusting in your worth and the value and dignity of all beings, of which we are connected in the mystery and wonder of abiding love. Amen, and blessed be.